Hello. In the lesson number 5, we're going to show how we can use control blocks when building our codes. Um, First, as you can see in our design space, we have our usual control button in this case, which we use as an event handler to trigger the execution of the code. And the second part is second component, as we will be demonstrating these control blocks on the lists. We have the list view here that is going to display the results of our processing. Before we actually go ahead and demonstrate some of these control blocks, we're going to show quickly and discuss quickly the 4 of them that are the most important. And these are the cornerstones pretty much of every programming language, not only the app inventor. So the one is the if block, if command. Then the next one is going to be this while. So we have a while block as well. And then we have this for. So for, we have if, while, and for. They are pretty much present in any programming language, right? The fourth one here is just a little bit modified for the app inventor, and we'll touch on that one as well. So let's see what each of these does for us. The first one, if, as you can tell, it is going to help us make a decision within our code because it's going to first examine this condition here. If this condition, whatever this is, in the end it can be only true or false. So if it's true, let's just take it. So after this is evaluated, and if it's true, then it's going to execute whatever commands we have in this nested space right here, right? If this statement is false, then it's simply going to skip all these commands under then, is going to exit and continue whatever might be the next command in line, right? This is the simplest case. As you can tell, this block is mutator, so we can change this as well. So we can actually have a situation where we want to execute different sets of commands depending on whether this statement is true or false. So if this statement is true, nothing changes compared to before. We execute whatever is under then, and after that it exits and continues whatever might be underneath. If this statement is false, then it's going to skip then and is going to go under else and either execute here, and there might be something else that is programmed here in a different way, because there are other options between these two. There is see if we can continue essentially to examine further some other conditions and so on. So we can build this if block quite complex by adding more and more checks and more comparisons. Right, for right now we're just gonna keep it simple here. Okay, so let's see what's different with the while. The while block, in a way it's similar. It's similar in a way that it still checks this condition while tests this condition here, and in the end it's going to be turn out to be only true or false, right? So let's say we check this condition and it's true. Still, as in if it's true, it's going to do whatever here we have in this nested space, right? But then if it's true and it executes this, it's going to bounce back and check this condition again. And as long as this condition is true, it's going to keep executing the same set of commands that are under do and keep bouncing back, rechecking true, and so on. So you see that this expression has to programmatically change in our code as it executes, because the only way to get out of the while block is when this statement is false. At the point that this statement becomes false, it is not going to execute these commands, and it's just going to exit the while loop right here. Okay. The next one is also used for repetition of the whatever commands we have under do here, but the number of repetitions is defined in a different way. So the number is defined by this variable here, which is just simply called here by default number. We can change this as always to anything that we want. And this number is going to change in this case from 1 to 5 in an increment of 1. So that means that this number is going to first assume number 1. It's going to execute this. It's going to come back and assume number 2, execute, come back until it runs to 5, when it's going to execute for the last time these commands here and exit this for block. If this was 2 instead of 1, this would assume 1, 3, and 5, so it would run these commands here only 3 times and then exit. Note another thing here, that by default we have a local variable here in this for block, which is this number here. So we can utilize this local variable because we know exactly how it changes in each step of this loop. Okay. Similar, just slightly modified, is this for block here, because this one is modified to work with the lists, as you can see here. So you bring here the list, and let's say that this list has 5 items, right? This is going to be then equivalent of this for block right here, because it's going to be executed for each item. Since we have 5, it's going to be executed 5 times before it exits. And in each of these executions, in each of these loops, we have this local variable where we can bring each of these items, one per loop, right, here, and if we need them and if we need to do something with them while we execute this block. Okay, so let's quickly demonstrate how we can use these blocks, these command blocks. First of all, we're gonna need our control button, right? So we want to use this as our event handler. Second, we said we're gonna be working with lists, so we're gonna need to create a list as our local variable. We know how to do that, so we're gonna initialize our local variable. We're gonna simply call it count, and then we need to create that list, right? So we go to list, make a list. We've shown all these steps before. We want to have 3 items, so we're gonna add here 1, and we're gonna assign constant to them. So we're gonna have 3 constants here as items of our list. Let's say this is going to be 6, this is 2, this is 1. And then we're going to use this list for each of these blocks, right? So let's say first, what do we do with the if block? So let's say with the if block, we want to add one more item to our list in case that our list doesn't already have 5 items, right? So our condition here is going to be to check whether our list has 5 items or not, so whether we have less than 5 items. So to do that, we're going to need to do this comparison, right? What do we compare? We want to compare how many items we have in a list. To do that, we need to find for the list what is its length, right? So right here. What is the length of which list? Of this list. So we're going to get that list. So this is our length of our list, and we want to see if this is less than 5, right? So we're going to compare this to 5 right here. And in case that this is true, then we want to add one more item to our list. So we go back to list. We need to find add item, right? So then we want to add item to which list? To this list, right? It's the same list here. And it doesn't matter what we add. Let's just say we add 0. So we add 0. And lastly, we want to display our list. So we go to the list view, set list view elements to our variable, which is our list, right? So let's quickly see what happens. We created a list. It has 3 items, 6, 2, 1. We're going to check if the length of our list is less than 5. It has less than 5 elements. The outcome of this check is true. So if this is true, then we're going to add to the same list the next item, which is going to be item number 4, and it's going to be 0. And then we're going to display this. So when we click this button, we should get 4 items, 6, 2, 1, and 0. Right? So let's check. Right, 6, 2, 1, and 0. For the while block, we're going to do something very similar, but only for a reason to differentiate the two. So let's say for the while, we do pretty much the same thing. So we're going to check whether our list has less than 5 items. So let's say we can copy this whole test here. So we check whether it has less than 5. If it has less than 5, we're going to add next item again, which can be 0, it doesn't matter. So let's say we're going to add, right, our next item, which is going to be 0, and then in the end we need still to display our result, so we're going to use the same expression here. So let's see. What do we have? We have 3 items. We're checking whether it has less than 5. This is true. Then it's going to add one more. So it's going to add 0 at position number 4. But then, as we said with while, it bounces back, right, and checks again. Is the length of our new list, which has 4 items, less than 5? And it's going to say yes, it is still true, and then it's going to add one more item, and we're going to end up having 5 items. It's going to bounce back and check whether the length of the 5 items is less than 5, which is going to be false, and then it's going to exit this while loop. So in this case, programmatically this is all the same. In the while block, we're going to end up having 5 items in the end, 6, 2, 1, 0, and 0. So let's check. If we click Control, we have now 5 items, 6, 2, 1, 0, and 0, right? So this was the while. And let's see, what do we do for the for loop? For the for loop, we can just do something slightly different, right? So let's say for the for loop, we're going to replace items that we have in our list with different items. And for a start, we're going to run the loop from 1 to 3 in increment of 1 so that we match the number of items in our list. And what we're going to do, we're going to replace, let's move this a little bit, we're going to replace items in our list. So we need to find for the list, right, we need to find where is the replace. It's right here. We need to replace items in our list. What is the list, right? This is our list count. What is the index, right? So what is the index that we want to replace? In each of these passings, we're going to replace exactly the index that corresponds to our number. So it's going to be number is going to assume 1, 2, and 3, right? So we need to find index that is going to be equivalent to this number, which is get number, right? And then we can just make up something. What do we want this to be replaced with? So let's say we're going to replace it. It really doesn't matter, but say twice. Say twice this number. So we need to multiply 2, right, 2 and this number. So we still need to get this number to be able to multiply it. So we need it here, right? And last thing, we need to display it, right? So we're gonna display it right here. So let's just, before we execute, let's just quickly review. What do we have? We have our list with 3 items. We're gonna run our for block that is gonna run exactly 3 times from 1 to 3 in increment of 1. This number is gonna assume values of 1 in the first run. In the second execution it's going to be 2, and in the last it's going to be 3. That's why we use this number as our index in the list, and we're going to replace the first item, right? What is going to be 2 times number is 1, so the first item is going to be 2. In the second passing, the number is going to be 2. So the second number in our list is going to be 2 times 2, 4. And in the last one, the number is going to be 3, and the replacement is going to be 6. So when we click this button and execute our for block, we're going to have 3 numbers here that are in our current list, right? And they're 2, 4, and 6. And lastly, we're going to do similar thing pretty much for our for block that deals with lists. So let's remove this one, and we're going to use this for right here. For each item in our list, which is this list, right? So we're going to get this list. What do we want to do? We want to replace item in the list. Okay, so let's go find replace right here, and list again is our list, so this is the same. We're gonna get our list. Now what is the index, right? So what is the index that we want to replace? We want to replace index at the point where we have our current item in the list. So we need to find a way to actually extract this index right here. So we need to find a way to extract index, right? So index in right here. So we need to find the index in our list, and the thing is going to be our item. So we need to find what is the index of our current item that we have in our for loop. And the list again, right, is the same list, so it's the count list right here. Let's just move this. Okay. And the replacement, it doesn't matter, just to save some time, we can do the same thing. We can replace this to right with this right here. The only difference is instead of get number, we're going to have here get item. So the last step is clearly we want to still able to see what is it that we execute, and before we execute, let's take a quick look again what this is going to do. We start with our list 6 to 1, and for each item in this list, which means that this is going to be run 3 times here, we're going to replace item in this list at the index that corresponds to the current item, and we're going to replace that item with twice its value, essentially. So we're going to pick 6, replace it 12, this replace 4, and this one replaced by 2. So when we execute this for block here by clicking the control, we get exactly 12, 4, and 2. Okay, so this concludes our introduction to the control blocks, and they're likely the most important blocks that we want to be familiar with, at least at this beginner's level. And just make sure that you are familiar with them before we proceed any further. This is it until the next lesson. Bye.